They called her a gold digger. They called her trash. For 5 years, Sarah sat at the end of the Sterling family table, enduring their insults, wearing her thrift store clothes while they flaunted diamonds. They thought she was weak. They thought she was broke. They had no idea who she really was. But when the family patriarch died, and the lawyer opened the sealed red envelope, the laughter finally stopped. The room went dead silent. The will didn't just leave Sarah a token trinket. It handed her the keys to an empire worth $100 million, and the reason why would destroy them all. The chandelier above the dining table at the Sterling estate cost more than Sarah Bennet's entire college education. It was a monstrosity of crystal and gold, casting a harsh, interrogating light onto the dinner guests below. Sarah sat at the far end of the long mahogany table, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She was trying to make herself small, a habit she had perfected over 3 years of marriage to Tom Sterling. Around her, the conversation flowed like the expensive vintage wine being poured by the silent staff, rich, heady, and completely excluding her. "Tom, darling," Beatrice Sterling cooed, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. She swirled her wine, her eyes flicking towards Sarah with practiced disdain. "I ran into the Hawthorns today. Their son just bought a summer home in the Hamptons, next to the Kennedys. It's a shame you're still renting that little apartment downtown." Tom, a handsome man, whose jawline was beginning to soften with the stress of pleasing his mother, cleared his throat. "It's a condo, Mother, and it's a good investment." "It's a box," Beatrice corrected, stabbing a piece of filet mignon. "But I suppose one must live within one's means, especially when one is supporting a non-contributing partner." Sarah felt the heat rise in her cheeks. She stared at her plate. She worked 40 hours a week as an archivist at the city library. It wasn't a fortune, but it was honest work. "I contribute, Beatrice," Sarah said softly. Beatrice laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. "Oh, honey, your little library stipend barely covers your own groceries. Look at you. That dress. Is that polyester?" "It's a blend," Sarah muttered instinctively, smoothing the fabric of the navy dress she had bought at TJ Maxx. "Charming," Beatrice sneered. She turned her attention to the woman sitting to Tom's right, Jessica Haynes. Jessica was everything Sarah wasn't, the daughter of an oil tycoon, loud blonde and draped in pearls. She was also Tom's ex-girlfriend, and Beatrice made sure she was invited to every single family function. "Jessica, tell us about your trip to Milan." Beatrice beamed. "Oh, it was fabulous, Bea," Jessica said, placing a manicured hand on Tom's forearm. "I saw a suit that would look absolutely devastating on Tom. I almost bought it, but I didn't know his size anymore. We should go shopping sometime, Tom. For old time's sake." Tom pulled his arm away slightly, glancing at Sarah. "I'm good on suits, Jess." "Nonsense," Beatrice interjected. "You look like a pauper. Sarah certainly can't afford to dress you properly. Let Jessica help." Sarah gripped her fork until her knuckles turned white. This was the routine. Humiliation served as an appetizer, followed by exclusion for the main course. The occasion was Richard Sterling's 70th birthday. Richard, the patriarch of the Sterling Empire, sat at the head of the table. He was a quiet man, his health failing breathing with the aid of a portable oxygen tank. He was the only person in this house who ever looked at Sarah with anything other than contempt. "Time for gifts," Beatrice announced, clapping her hands. The ritual began. Jessica gave Richard a gold-plated watch. Beatrice gave him a custom oil painting of the estate. Tom gave him a set of rare golf clubs, purchased on a credit card Sarah knew was nearly maxed out. Then all eyes turned to Sarah. "And what did you bring, dear?" Beatrice asked, her smile predatory. "Another bookmark." Sarah reached under her chair and pulled out a small, simply wrapped box. She walked to the head of the table and placed it gently in front of Richard. "Happy birthday, Richard," she said softly. Richard's shaking hands undid the ribbon. He opened the box. Inside lay a leather-bound journal, old and weathered. Beatrice scoffed loudly. "A used notebook." "Really, Sarah? We know things are tight, but this is insulting." "It's not just a notebook," Sarah said, her voice trembling but clear. "Richard told me once he wished he had written down the stories his father told him about the war. I spent the last 6 months tracking down his father's old regiment logs and transcribed them. I found photos too. It's a history of your family, Richard." The room went silent. Richard ran a thumb over the leather. His eyes, usually cloudy, glistened with tears. "Trash," Beatrice spat, breaking the moment. "Absolute trash. We are giving him gold and art, and you give him old paper. Take it away." "No," Richard wheezed. His voice was weak, but it carried the weight of iron. He looked up at Sarah. "Thank you, Sarah. This is the best gift I have ever received." Beatrice's face turned a violent shade of red. "Don't pity her, Richard. She's digging for scraps. She's waiting for you to die so she can claw at your money." "Mother!" Tom shouted, finally standing up. "Sit down, Thomas." Beatrice slammed her hand on the table. "I will not have this charity case ruin my husband's birthday with her garbage. She contributes nothing. She is nothing." Sarah stood there, the eyes of the wealthy elite boring into her. She looked at Tom, hoping he would do more, say more. But he just sat back down, defeated. Sarah didn't cry. She simply nodded till Richard turned on her heel and walked out of the dining room. "That's right, run away," Beatrice called after her, "and don't come back until you can afford to sit at this table." Sarah walked out into the cold night air, the heavy oak door slamming shut behind her. She got into her 2015 Honda Civic, the engine sputtering as it turned over. As she drove away from the mansion, she didn't feel sadness. She felt a cold, hard resolve. Beatrice thought money was the only power in the world. She was about to find out how wrong she was. 3 months passed. The divide between Sarah and the Sterlings grew into a canyon. Tom spent more time at the office, which Sarah suspected meant long lunches with his mother and Jessica Haynes, and Sarah spent more time at the library. But she wasn't just shelving books. In the basement archives of the city library, Sarah sat surrounded by microfiche films and dusty ledgers. She wasn't researching history anymore. She was researching the Sterling family business. Beatrice Sterling liked to pretend their money was old and secure, but Sarah had noticed things. Letters from creditors that Beatrice quickly hid. The way Richard had looked so tired, not just from age, but from burden. One Tuesday evening, Tom came home to their small condo, smelling of expensive perfume. Jessica's signature scent, Chanel No. 5. "Mum wants us to come over for dinner on Friday," Tom said, loosening his tie. He didn't look her in the eye. "I'm not going," Sarah said calmly from the kitchen, where she was chopping vegetables for a stew. "Sarah, come on. She's just stressed. Dad's getting worse." "She hates me, Tom, and you let her treat me like a dog." "I defend you," Tom protested weakly. You exist, Sarah corrected. You don't defend. Look, it's important. Tom sighed, leaning against the counter. Dad is... He's really bad. The doctors say it's a matter of days. He's calling a family meeting. He asked for you specifically. Sarah froze the knife, hovering over a carrot. Richard asked for her fine, Sarah said. For Richard. When they arrived at the estate on Friday, the atmosphere was funereal. The house was dark, the servants moving in hushed tones. Beatrice was pacing in the drawing room, wearing a black silk robe, looking like a vulture waiting for a carcass. Jessica was there, of course, pouring brandy for herself. She's here, Beatrice sneered as Sarah entered. Wonderful, the vulture circles. I'm here because Richard asked for me, Sarah said, her voice steady. He's delirious, Jessica chimed in, swirling her glass. He probably thinks you're the maid. Before Sarah could respond, the family doctor, Dr. Evans, came down the stairs. He looked grave. He's ready to see you now, all of you. They filed into the master bedroom. The smell of antiseptic and decay was overwhelming. Richard lay in the massive bed, looking small and frail. His breathing was ragged. He gestured for them to come closer. Beatrice threw herself onto the side of the bed, weeping dramatically. Oh, Richard, don't leave us. What will we do? Stop acting, Bea, Richard whispered. His voice was dry as dust. It gives me a headache. Beatrice stiffened, pulling back. Richard's eyes scanned the room. They passed over Tom, over Jessica, and landed on Sarah. He lifted a trembling hand. Sarah stepped forward and took it. It was cold. Sarah, he rasped. I'm here, Richard. The journal, he said, a faint smile touching his lips. I read it every night. You listened. I did. They never listened. Richard said, his gaze shifting to his wife and son. They only counted. Dad, don't talk like that, Tom said, his voice cracking. Richard ignored him. He squeezed Sarah's hand with surprising strength. I have made arrangements. It's all in the red envelope. Do not let them bully you. I won't, Sarah promised. Richard closed his eyes. Good. Now, I'm tired. Those were his last words. 10 minutes later, the machines began to wail. Beatrice screamed a sound that seemed more about panic than grief. Tom wept. Jessica looked at her watch. Sarah stood silently in the corner. She didn't cry. She had done her grieving for this family a long time ago. She watched Beatrice immediately begin barking orders at the staff about the funeral arrangements, ensuring the press would be there. You can leave now, Beatrice hissed at Sarah as the undertakers arrived. He's gone. There's nothing here for you anymore. Sarah looked at the grieving widow, whose eyes were dry and calculating. I'll see you at the reading of the will, Beatrice, Sarah said. Don't bother. Beatrice laughed cruelly. I'm sure he left you his old socks. Maybe you can sew them into a quilt. Sarah walked out, the secret Richard had shared burning in her mind. The red envelope. The funeral was a spectacle. Beatrice had turned it into a gala event. Senators, business tycoons, and socialites filled the cathedral. Sarah sat in the back row alone, while Jessica sat next to Tom in the front pew, holding his hand. The press snapped photos of the grieving family whore, cropping Sarah out of the frame entirely. 2 days later, the reading of the will was held at the law offices of Halloway and Pym. The conference room was imposing, lined with leather books and overlooking the city skyline. Beatrice sat at the head of the table, dressed in designer black, looking impatient. Tom sat to her right, Jessica, for some reason, had also tagged along, claiming moral support. Sarah entered quietly and took the seat furthest from them. "Why is she even here?" Beatrice asked loudly as the lawyer, Mr. Arthur Pym, entered the room. Pym was an elderly man with spectacles and a no-nonsense demeanor. "Can't you just mail her the check for $50 and let us handle the real business, Mrs. Sterling?" Mr. Pym said, his voice stern. "Mrs. Sarah Sterling is a named beneficiary. She is required to be present." "Sarah Sterling," Beatrice mocked. "She doesn't deserve that name." "Let's proceed," Pym said, opening a thick file. He began with the minor bequests. The staff were given generous bonuses. Several charities received donations. Then came the assets. "To my wife, Beatrice Sterling." Pym read, "I leave the Sterling estate in Greenwich, the collection of vintage cars, and the contents of the safe deposit box at Chase, Manhattan." Beatrice smirked. "Finally. And the accounts, the liquid assets." Pym cleared his throat. "To my son Thomas Sterling, I leave the family business. Sterling Industries, including all voting shares." Tom sat up straighter. "Wow. Okay. I can run it. I can do this." Beatrice frowned. "Whatever I control, Thomas, so I control the business. Move on to the accounts, Pym. The Sterling Trust. That's where the real money is." Pym paused. He looked uncomfortable. "The Sterling Trust is empty, Mrs. Sterling." The room went dead quiet. "Excuse me." Beatrice stood up. "Empty. That trust had $50 million in it 10 years ago. Mr. Sterling made several bad investments in the last 5 years, trying to save the manufacturing division," Pym explained. "And frankly, Mrs. Sterling, your spending habits depleted the rest. The estate you just inherited is heavily mortgaged. The business Thomas just inherited is currently operating at a loss." Beatrice sank into her chair, her face pale. "You're lying. We're broke." "Asset-rich, cash-poor," Pym corrected, "and heavily in debt." "No," Beatrice whispered. She looked at Tom. "You have to fix this. Tom sell the company." "If he sells now, he'll get pennies on the dollar," Pym said. "It's near bankruptcy." Jessica Haynes slowly removed her hand from Tom's arm. She shifted her chair slightly away from him. "Is that it?" Beatrice shrieked. "He left us nothing but debt. After all I put up with, there is one more item," Pym said. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick, sealed red envelope. Beatrice's eyes narrowed. "What is that?" "This," Pym said, "is the private portfolio. It is a separate entity from Sterling Industries. It contains assets that Richard acquired independently over the last 40 years. Tech stocks bought in the 80s, land deals in Tokyo and Dubai, private patents." "How much is it worth?" Beatrice demanded, greedy hope flaring in her eyes. Pym adjusted his glasses. "The current valuation is approximately $100 million. The air left the room. $100 million. It was enough to save the company, pay off the debts, and keep Beatrice in diamonds for 3 lifetimes. "Give it to me," Beatrice demanded, reaching out a manicured hand. "Give it to me now." Pym held the envelope out of reach. "I cannot do that, Mrs. Sterling." "Why not? I am his wife." "Because," Pym said, his eyes locking onto the woman sitting quietly at the end of the table, "he didn't leave it to you." Pym turned his body toward Sarah. "The entirety of the private portfolio, valued at $100 million, is left to the sole beneficiary." Beatrice was shaking. Tom was staring. Jessica's mouth was open. "Sarah Bennett Sterling." The silence in the conference room of Halloway and Pym was heavy, suffocating. It lasted for 10 seconds, but to Sarah it felt like a lifetime. Then the explosion happened. You forged this!" Beatrice screamed, lunging across the table. Her fingernails, painted a blood red, scrabbled against the polished mahogany. "You little thief! You manipulated a dying man! I'll have you arrested. I'll have you thrown in a cell." Tom sat frozen, his face a mask of pale shock. He looked from the empty trust fund documents to Sarah, his eyes wide. "Sarah, 100 million. That can't be right." "Sit down, Mrs. Sterling," Mr. Pym said, his voice cutting through the hysteria like a gavel. He didn't flinch. "I assure you the paperwork is ironclad. Richard was of sound mind. He underwent 3 separate psychological evaluations before signing this amendment, specifically to prevent exactly this kind of outburst." "I don't believe it," Beatrice shrieked, turning on her son. "Tom, do something. She's stealing your birthright. That money belongs to the company. It belongs to us." Tom stood up, his legs shaky. He looked at Sarah, putting on the charm that had once worked so well on her. "Sarah, honey, look. Obviously Dad was confused. He probably meant for you to manage it for the family. Right? We're a team, you and me. We can fix this together." Sarah looked at her husband. For years she had craved his approval. She had wanted him to look at her the way he was looking at her now, with total undivided attention. But now that she had it, she realized it wasn't love. It was hunger. "We aren't a team, Tom," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady. "We haven't been a team since the day you let your mother call my wedding dress cheap." And you laughed. "I never—" "You did," Sarah interrupted. "And last week, when you were working late, you were at the Ritz with Jessica." Jessica Haynes, who had been trying to shrink into the background, gasped. I was just comforting him." "You were comforting him in a deluxe suite charged to the company card," Sarah said coldly. "I saw the statements, Tom. I'm the one who organizes the mail. Remember the boring wife who handles the paperwork." Beatrice slammed her hand on the table. "Enough of this soap opera, Pym. I want to contest this. I want a judge." "I anticipated this," Mr. Pym said. He reached for a remote control on the table. "Richard left one more thing. A video testament. He said it was for the vultures." A large screen on the wall flickered to life. The image was grainy, recorded in Richard's study a month before he died. He was sitting in his leather chair, looking frail but sharp-eyed. He looked directly into the camera. "Hello, Beatrice. Hello, Thomas," the video Richard said. Beatrice gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "If you are watching this, it means you tried to fight the will." Richard continued, his voice raspy. "I knew you would. You think you are entitled to my empire because you share my last name. But you forgot what that name stands for. It stands for work, for loyalty." On screen, Richard leaned forward. "Beatrice, you spent 40 years spending money you didn't earn. You treated people like dirt. And Thomas, my son, you are weak. You let your mother run your life, and you treat your wife, the only good thing you ever brought into this family, like a servant. I cannot trust you with my legacy. You would squander the capital in a year." Richard paused, a softness entering his eyes. "Sarah, my dear Sarah, you were the only one who asked me how I felt, not how much I was worth. You listened to my stories. You honored my past. You have the heart of a Sterling, even if you weren't born one. The money is yours. Do what you want with it. Burn it, spend it, or build something new. but do not give them a dime until they learn what it means to earn it." The screen went black. The room was silent again, but this time it was the silence of total defeat. Beatrice sank into her chair, looking older than Sarah had ever seen her. He hated us," Tom whispered. "He didn't hate you," Sarah said, standing up. She picked up the red envelope. It felt heavy in her hand. "He was just disappointed. And honestly, Tom, so am I." "Sarah, wait," Tom pleaded, reaching for her. "We can talk about this at home." Sarah pulled her arm away. "I'm not going home, Tom. The lease on the condo is in your name. You said it was a good investment. I hope you can pay the rent without my library stipend." She turned to Mr. Pym. "Mr. Pym, I'd like to discuss the transfer of assets in private. Can you please escort these people out?" "With pleasure," Pym smiled. "You can't do this," Beatrice screamed as security guards appeared at the door. "I am Beatrice Sterling. I am the matriarch of this family." "Not anymore," Sarah said, not looking back. "Now you're just a guest." The transformation didn't happen overnight, but it happened fast. With the $100 million secured, Sarah didn't go on a shopping spree. She didn't buy a yacht or a private island. She did something far more dangerous to the Sterling family. She bought leverage. She quit her job at the library, but she didn't stop working. She spent 12 hours a day with Arthur Pym and a team of forensic accountants. She learned the intricate web of Sterling Industries, the debts, the liens, the hidden mortgages Beatrice had taken out to fund her lavish parties. The Sterling family, meanwhile, was in free fall. Without the safety net of the trust fund, the reality of their financial ruin hit like a freight train. The bank froze the company accounts. The staff at the Greenwich estate, realizing their paychecks were bouncing, walked out. 2 weeks after the funeral, Tom stood outside the Plaza Hotel. He was wearing the same suit he had worn to the funeral, but it looked rumpled now. He looked up at the penthouse suite where he knew Sarah was staying. He had texted her 50 times. She hadn't replied once. He adjusted his tie, told the doorman he was Sarah's husband, and was promptly told he was not on the list. "Please," Tom begged. "It's an emergency. My mother. She's sick." It was a lie, but it worked. 10 minutes later, he was riding the gold-plated elevator to the penthouse. When the doors opened, Tom stopped dead. Sarah was standing by the window overlooking Central Park. She wasn't wearing the polyester blends Beatrice had mocked. She was wearing a tailored cream pantsuit that screamed quiet luxury. Her hair, usually tied back in a messy bun, was blown out in sleek chestnut waves. She looked powerful. She looked unattainable. "You look incredible," Tom stammered. Sarah turned. Her expression was neutral. "What do you want, Tom?" "I miss you," he said, walking into the room. "The condo is so quiet without you. I've been thinking I was an idiot. I let the stress of the business get to me. I took you for granted." "You took me for a fool," Sarah corrected. She walked over to a marble table and picked up a file. "You said your mother is sick." "She's unwell. The stress. The bank is threatening to foreclose on the estate, Sarah. It's Dad's house. You can't let them take Dad's house." "It's not Dad's house anymore," Sarah said. "It's the bank's house. Beatrice mortgaged it to 120% of its value to pay for her summer in complications. We can save it," Tom urged, stepping closer. "With the portfolio. Sarah, listen. I love you. We can start over. I'll kick Jessica out of my life. I promise. Just come home. Bring the money, and we can save the company, save the house. We can be the power couple everyone envies." Sarah laughed. It was a dark, dry sound. "You still don't get it, do you?" She threw the file onto the table. It slid across the marble and stopped in front of him. "Open it." Tom opened the folder. Inside were photos. Not of him and Jessica, he expected those. These were photos of documents. "What is this that Sarah said is a shell company called Blue Heron LLC? Your mother set it up 5 years ago. She's been siphoning money out of Sterling Industries into offshore accounts in the Caymans. That's why the company is failing, Tom. It's not the market. It's embezzlement." Tom went pale. "No. Mother wouldn't." "She did," Sarah said. "And you signed the checks. I found your signature on the authorization forms. You didn't even read them, did you?" Tom dropped the folder. I just signed what she told me to." "Exactly." Sarah said, her eyes hard. "You're not a CEO, Tom. You're a puppet. And if I give you this money, Beatrice will drain it dry within a year, and you'll be right back here begging." "So what are you going to do?" Tom asked, his voice trembling. "Turn us in? Send your own husband to jail?" "No," Sarah said. "I'm not going to send you to jail. That would be too easy. And besides, the scandal would destroy the company entirely, and there are 500 innocent employees who need their jobs." She walked over to him, standing toe to toe. "I'm going to save the company, Tom, but not by giving you money." "Then how?" "By taking it." The annual Sterling Charity Gala was the highlight of the New York social calendar. Usually it was a celebration of wealth. This year it was a desperate masquerade. Beatrice had insisted on going forward with it, despite the lack of funds. She had spent the last of her personal jewelry simply to rent the ballroom at the Pierre Hotel. Her plan was simple: find a new investor. A white knight who would be charmed by the Sterling name and bail them out without asking too many questions. The ballroom was filled with the elite. Beatrice stood at the entrance, draped in a rented fur, holding a glass of champagne she couldn't afford. Tom stood beside her, looking like a man marching to the gallows. "Smile, Thomas," Beatrice hissed through her teeth. "I see Mr. Henderson over there. He's worth billions. If I can just get 5 minutes with him." "Mother, everyone knows," Tom whispered. "Look at them. They're staring." It was true. The whispers rippled through the room. The news of the broke Sterlings had hit the tabloids. The guests were like sharks sensing blood. Suddenly, the whispers stopped. The murmur of conversation died out completely. The heads of 300 guests turned toward the grand staircase. Beatrice frowned and turned around. "Who is distracting them from—" Her words died in her throat. Descending the stairs was Sarah. But it wasn't the Sarah she knew. This Sarah was wearing a gown of midnight blue velvet that hugged her figure, shimmering like the night sky. Around her neck sat a diamond necklace that Beatrice recognized instantly. It was the Star of the East, a piece from Richard's private vault that Beatrice had tried to find for years. Sarah descended the stairs with the grace of a queen. She wasn't alone. Flanking her were Arthur Pym and 2 serious-looking men in grey suits. "The audacity," Beatrice sputtered. "She comes here to my party." Beatrice marched to the bottom of the stairs to intercept her. "You have some nerve," Beatrice hissed, blocking Sarah's path. "This is a private event. Get out!" Sarah looked down at her mother-in-law. "Actually, Beatrice, I'm here on business." "We have no business with you." Beatrice spat. "Security." "I wouldn't do that," Sarah said calmly. She gestured to the room. "You're looking for an investor, aren't you?" "Someone to buy the debt of Sterling Industries." "We have plenty of interested parties," Beatrice lied loudly. "No, you don't," Sarah said. Her voice was projected perfectly, carrying over the silent crowd. "Because I already bought it." A gasp went through the room. "What?" Beatrice stepped back. Sarah nodded to Mr. Pym. The lawyer stepped forward, holding a document. "As of this morning," Pym announced, "Mrs. Sarah Sterling has purchased the outstanding debt of Sterling Industries from the creditor banks. She is now the primary lien holder of the company assets, the factory, and—" Pym looked at Beatrice over his spectacles. "The Greenwich estate." You own my house," Beatrice whispered, clutching her chest. "Technically," Sarah said, "I own the mortgage. And since you haven't made a payment in 4 months, I am within my rights to foreclose. Tonight." Tom stepped forward, looking terrified. "Sarah, please, don't do this here." "This is exactly where we do this, Tom," Sarah said. "In front of the people you tried so hard to impress. The people you mocked me for not being good enough for." Sarah turned to the crowd. She made eye contact with the wealthy elites who had ignored her at dinner parties for years. "For years I sat at your tables and listened," Sarah said, her voice ringing clear. "I listened to you brag about your wealth while you judged my worth. You thought I was weak because I was silent. But in chess, the quiet pieces are the most dangerous." She turned back to Beatrice. "I am offering you a deal, Beatrice. A one-time offer." "Anything," Beatrice sobbed, her pride finally shattering. "I'll do anything. I am taking control of Sterling Industries. Tom is fired effective immediately. You, Beatrice, will step down from the board. In exchange, I will not foreclose on the estate. I will allow you to live there until you die. But the title transfers to me. You will live there as my guest, and you will live on a stipend that I approve." "A stipend?" Beatrice cried. Like an allowance." "Exactly." Sarah smiled coldly. "I've done the math. Based on the cost of living, $2,000 a month should be plenty. It's what you used to tell me was enough for groceries, remember?" The crowd watched in stunned silence. The humiliation was absolute. "You can't be serious," Tom said. "I'm your husband." "Not for long," Sarah said. She reached into her clutch and pulled out a thick envelope. She slapped it against Tom's chest. "Divorce papers. I've already signed them. I'm keeping my name, though. I think I've earned it more than you have." Sarah turned to leave, her velvet dress swirling around her. "Wait!" Beatrice screamed. "You can't leave us like this. We're family." Sarah paused on the stairs. She looked back over her shoulder, the diamonds at her throat catching the light. "No, Beatrice," Sarah said. "We were never family. I was just the broke daughter-in-law. And you're just the tenants." She walked out the double doors, leaving the Sterling legacy in ruins behind her, and stepped into the cool night air. But the story wasn't over. Sarah had won the war, but she had made powerful enemies. And as she got into the black limousine, waiting for her, she didn't notice the man in the shadows across the street, snapping photos with a long-range lens. Beatrice wasn't the type to go down without a dirty fight. And she had one card left to play a secret from Sarah's past that even Sarah had forgotten. 6 months had passed since the night of the gala, and the landscape of New York high society had shifted tectonically. Sarah Sterling was no longer the invisible wife. She was the Iron Lady of Greenwich. Under her leadership, Sterling Industries had not only recovered, but flourished. She had gutted the middle management, fired the cronies Tom had hired, and pivoted the manufacturing division toward green energy components, a patent Richard had hidden in the red envelope, because he knew Tom wouldn't understand its value. The stock price had tripled. Tom and Beatrice, meanwhile, were living a nightmare in high definition. Per their agreement, they were allowed to reside in the guest cottage on the estate grounds, a 2-bedroom structure that had previously housed the gardening staff. Beatrice, stripped of her servants, her drivers, and her credit cards, was forced to learn how to operate a washing machine at the age of 65. But Beatrice Sterling was not a woman who accepted defeat. She was a woman who plotted. It was a rainy Tuesday in November when Beatrice sat at her small kitchen table staring at a man in a damp trench coat. His name was Detective Miller, a disgraced private investigator who worked for cash and didn't ask questions. "Tell me you found something, Miller," Beatrice hissed, pouring him a cup of instant coffee, a beverage she drank with visible disgust. "I am paying you with the last of my jewelry. This better be good." Miller took a sip and grimaced. He pulled a manila envelope from his coat. "I dug deep, Mrs. Sterling. Just like you asked. You wanted dirt on Sarah Bennett. Well, I found something better than dirt. I found a grave." Beatrice's eyes widened. "She killed someone?" "No," Miller said, sliding a photo across the table. It was a picture of a tombstone in a small cemetery in Ohio. The name on the stone was Sarah Bennett. The date of death was 12 years ago. "The woman living in your penthouse, running your company. She isn't Sarah Bennett," Miller said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "The real Sarah Bennett died in a car accident when she was 22. Your daughter-in-law stole a dead woman's identity." Beatrice stared at the photo, and then slowly a smile stretched across her face. It was a grotesque, triumphant expression. "She's a fraud," Beatrice whispered, trembling with excitement. "She's a con artist. She falsified legal documents. She married Tom under a false name." "Which means," Miller added, "the marriage is void, the will is void, everything she signed is invalid. She goes to prison." Beatrice cackled, standing up and knocking her chair over. "And we get it all back. The money, the house, everything." Beatrice grabbed her coat. "Come with me, Miller. We're going to the police. And then we're going to the board of directors." The emergency board meeting of Sterling Industries was called for 9:00 a.m. the following morning. Beatrice had used her old connections to force the issue, claiming she had material evidence of criminal fraud regarding the CEO. The boardroom was tense. 12 men and women in expensive suits sat around the glass table. At the head sat Sarah, looking calm and composed in a charcoal blazer. To her right sat Arthur Pym, the lawyer. The doors banged open. Beatrice marched in, flanked by Tom, who looked nauseous, and 2 uniformed police officers she had persuaded to accompany her, based on Miller's evidence. "Arrest her!" Beatrice screamed, pointing a shaking finger at Sarah. "Arrest the imposter!" The board members murmured in confusion. Mr. Henderson, the oldest board member, stood up. "Beatrice, what is the meaning of this? You have no authority here." "I have every authority," Beatrice shouted. She slammed the file onto the table. "The woman you call CEO is a criminal. Her name isn't Sarah Bennett. Sarah Bennett is dead. This woman stole a corpse's identity to infiltrate my family and steal our fortune." She threw the photo of the tombstone onto the table. "Tell them, officer," Beatrice commanded. One of the police officers stepped forward awkwardly. "Ma'am, based on the evidence provided, there is a discrepancy with the Social Security number used on the marriage license. We need to take Mrs. Sterling in for questioning regarding identity theft." Tom stepped forward, finding a shred of courage. "Sarah, is it true? Just tell us. If you admit it now, maybe Mum will go easy on you." Sarah didn't move. She didn't look at the police. She didn't look at the photo of the grave. She just looked at Beatrice. "You really dug deep, didn't you, Beatrice?" Sarah asked softly. "I did what I had to do to protect my family from a parasite," Beatrice gloated. "It's over, Sarah, or whoever you are. The game is up. You're going to jail, and I am taking back my company." Sarah slowly stood up. The room went silent. She walked over to the window, looking out at the city skyline. "You're right," Sarah said. Her voice was clear, lacking any trace of fear. "Sarah Bennett is dead. She was my best friend in college. She died in the crash that I survived." A gasp went through the room. "So you admitted it," Beatrice shrieked. "Officer Cuff her." "I used her name," Sarah continued, turning around, her eyes blazing with a sudden intense fire, "because I needed to disappear. I needed to hide from people who were looking for me. People with far more power than you could ever dream of, Beatrice." "Excuses," Beatrice scoffed. "You were hiding from the law." "No," Sarah said. She reached into her blazer pocket and pulled out a different ID card. She tossed it onto the table. It landed it face up. The name on the card didn't say Sarah Bennett. It read, Sarah Montgomery. Henderson, the board member, gasped audibly. He grabbed the card, his hands shaking. Montgomery, as in the Montgomery Group, as in Alexander Montgomery. "He is my father," Sarah said calmly. The silence that descended on the room was heavier than the one at the reading of the will. The Montgomery family wasn't just rich, they were American royalty. They owned shipping lines, steel mills, and half the real estate in San Francisco. They were billionaires, not millionaires. "That's impossible," Beatrice whispered, her face draining of color. "Alexander Montgomery's daughter. She ran away 10 years ago. It was in all the papers. They said she was unstable." "I wasn't unstable," Sarah said, her voice turning ice cold. "I was being sold. My father wanted to marry me off to a 50-year-old oil tycoon to merge our companies. I refused. He told me I was property, not a person. So I left. I took my roommate's name with her parents' blessing, and I started over with nothing. I wanted to see if I could make a life on my own. I wanted to see if anyone would love me, for me, and not for the billions attached to my last name." Sarah turned her gaze to Tom. He was leaning against the wall, looking as if he had been punched in the gut. "I met you, Tom," Sarah said, her voice softening with a sad nostalgia. "And for a while I thought you were different. You didn't know who I was. You loved the waitress. You loved the librarian. But then you let them break you. You let your mother turn you into a snob. You mocked me for being poor, never realizing that I could have bought your entire family 10 times over with my trust fund." Tom fell to his knees. Tears streamed down his face. "Sarah, I didn't know. I swear. Please." "It's too late, Tom," Sarah said. She turned back to Beatrice. The older woman was hyperventilating, clutching the edge of the table. "You called me a gold digger," Sarah said, walking slowly toward her mother-in-law. "You called me trash. You thought you were so superior because you had a mansion and I had a Honda. But the truth is, Beatrice, you were never in my league. You were playing checkers while I was playing chess." Sarah looked at the police officers. "Officers, you can check my fingerprints. They will match Sarah Montgomery. I have committed no crime. Using a pseudonym for personal safety is not illegal in this state, provided no fraud is committed. And since I used my own money, Richard's money, which he legally left me to save this company, there is no fraud." The officers looked at each other, nodded respectfully to Sarah, and stepped back. "Sorry for the disturbance, Miss Montgomery." "Get them out of here," Sarah said, waving a hand toward Beatrice and Tom. "And Arthur?" "Yes, Miss Montgomery," the lawyer asked. "Evict them from the guest cottage. Today. They can find a shelter. I hear the city has some excellent resources for the poor. It's time they learned what it's really like to start from zero." "No!" Beatrice screamed as security grabbed her arms. "You can't do this. I am a Sterling." "And I," Sarah said, turning her back on them, "am a Montgomery, and I am done with you." 3 years had passed since the doors of the boardroom slammed shut on the Sterling family. The skyline of New York City looked the same, but inside the gleaming glass tower that used to house Sterling Industries, everything had changed. The gold-plated signage was gone, replaced by a sleek, modern steel logo, Phoenix Enterprises. Sarah sat in the corner office on the 50th floor. She wasn't wearing the polyester blends Beatrice had once mocked, nor was she wearing the flashy designer labels Beatrice had coveted. She wore a bespoke white suit, tailored to perfection, projecting an aura of quiet, untouchable power. Her assistant buzzed in. "Miss Montgomery, your father is on line 1. Sarah paused, looking at the blinking light. 3 years ago, answering that call would have terrified her. Today, she pressed the button with a steady hand. "Hello, Dad," she said. "I saw the quarterly reports, Sarah." Alexander Montgomery's voice boomed gruff, but tinged with a new emotion, respect. "You're up 40% on the renewable energy sector. You're beating my shipping margins." "I learned from the best," Sarah replied, a small smile playing on her lips. "But I did it my way. No arranged marriages, no mergers for convenience." "I know." Alexander sighed. "I was wrong, kid. You didn't need a husband to secure a legacy. You are the legacy." It was the apology she had waited 10 years to hear. Sarah hung up the phone, a weight finally lifting off her chest. She had reclaimed her name, but more importantly, she had redefined what it meant. Meanwhile, across the river in New Jersey, the atmosphere was far less triumphant. The fluorescent lights of Budget Wheels car rental hummed with an annoying flicker. Tom Sterling stood behind the counter, wearing a polyester uniform that was a size too tight. He looked 10 years older. His hairline was receding, and the charm that had once allowed him to coast through life had evaporated, leaving behind a bitter, tired man. "I said I wanted a sedan, not a compact," a customer yelled, slamming his hand on the counter. "I'm sorry, sir," Tom muttered, typing painfully slow on the outdated computer. "It's all we have available right now." "Do you know who I am?" the customer demanded. "I'm in a rush." Tom flinched. He used to say those words. "Do you know who I am?" Now nobody knew, and nobody cared. As the customer stormed off, Tom looked at the TV mounted in the waiting area. It was tuned to CNBC. The anchor was interviewing the businesswoman of the year. There on the screen, radiating confidence and beauty, was Sarah. She was laughing at something the interviewer said, a genuine free laugh that Tom realized he had never heard when they were married. "That's my ex-wife," Tom whispered to the teenager working the register next to him. The kid didn't even look up from his phone. "Sure, man. And I'm Batman. Go clean the bathroom, Tom. Someone spilled coffee." Tom stared at the screen for one last second, watching the woman he had thrown away for a shallow socialite before grabbing the mop bucket. The regret was a physical pain in his chest, a heavy stone he would have to carry for the rest of his life. 40 miles away, in a state-subsidized assisted living facility in Yonkers, Beatrice Sterling sat in a communal rec room that smelled of bleach and boiled cabbage. She was playing solitaire with a deck of sticky cards. She wore a faded cardigan, her hair grey and undyed. "I used to host galas," Beatrice told the nurse who was checking her blood pressure. "The mayor came. We had ice sculptures, real caviar." "That's nice, honey," the nurse said, clearly not listening, ripping the Velcro on the blood pressure cuff. "I'm out. My daughter-in-law stole it all," Beatrice hissed, her eyes darting around the room paranoidly. "She was a witch, a con artist." "Time for your meds, Beatrice." Beatrice swallowed the pills with a cup of lukewarm water. She didn't know that the private room she slept in, the extra physical therapy sessions she received, and the premium cable package on her TV were all paid for by an anonymous donor. Sarah paid the bills every month, not out of kindness, and certainly not out of love. She did it because she wanted Beatrice to live a long, long time. She wanted Beatrice to have many years to sit in that chair staring at the wall, remembering every cruel word she had ever spoken, realizing that the trash she had tried to throw out was the only reason she had a roof over her head. Back in the penthouse office, the door opened. Daniel West walked in. He was a man of equal stature to Sarah, a tech innovator who had built his own fortune from the ground up. He didn't need Sarah's money, and he didn't need her name. He just wanted her. "Ready to go?" Daniel asked, adjusting his tuxedo. "The helicopter is waiting. The charity ball starts in 20 minutes. "Just 1 second, Sarah said. She opened the bottom drawer of her mahogany desk. Inside lay the old leather-bound journal she had given Richard Sterling, and the empty red envelope. She ran her fingers over the leather. Richard had been the only Sterling who saw her worth when she was nothing. She kept the journal to remind her of him, and the envelope to remind her of the fire she had walked through to get here. "You okay?" Daniel asked, offering his hand. Sarah closed the drawer and locked it. She looked at the man who looked at her with adoration, not calculation. She looked at the city she now helped run. "I'm better than okay." Sarah smiled, taking his hand. "I'm finally free." The broke daughter-in-law was gone. The scared, runaway heiress was gone. Sarah Montgomery walked out of the office, head held high, stepping into the future she had built with her own 2 hands. The game was over, and the Queen had won. And that is the incredible story of Sarah Sterling, or, as the world now knows, her Sarah Montgomery. It serves as a powerful reminder that the wheel of karma is always turning. Beatrice and Tom spent years judging Sarah by her bank account, only to end up with nothing, while Sarah proved that true nobility comes from character, not a title. I want to hear from you guys in the comments. Do you think Tom's punishment was enough? Watching his ex-wife succeed while he cleans bathrooms is brutal. But was it justice, and would you have paid for Beatrice's nursing home like Sarah did? Or would you have let her end up on the street? Let me know your thoughts. If you enjoyed this story of hidden identity betrayal and sweet, sweet revenge, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a good drama, and hit subscribe with the notification bell turned on so you never miss our next story. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.